In the manga Jujutsu Kaisen, Gojo vs Sukuna is undoubtedly the most debated topic in the community. And because we all knew the fight was eventually going to happen in the manga, everyone's taking their predictions and giving reasons for why they predict who's going to win. But the problem I have is that this isn't the same Sukuna that we usually know. This Sukuna is possessing the body of Megumi Fushiguro and has his techniques and looks, and it's kind of implied that he's stronger than before, which I'll get more into later. But in this video, I'll be going over Sukuna in his own body and 20 fingers versus Gojo and how the matchup actually works out. But before we begin, I'd like to say that if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to like the video and also subscribe to my channel, since it will tell me that you want more JJK content in the future, since I'm generally a blue lock content creator. Now to begin the video, let's go over Sukuna and his techniques and where he really scales to. The very first time we get to see an example of Sukuna's strength is in chapter 1, where just 1/20th of his power is able to attract multiple curses that almost kill Megumi and Yuji. So Yuji, knowing that this is a very dangerous situation and he needs curse energy to defeat this curse, decides to actually eat the Sukuna finger to gain more curse energy and fight this curse off. And after eating this finger, Sukuna manifests and literally just one-shots the curse with no difficulty at all. But a more interesting feat for Sukuna comes in chapter 8. In this chapter, Yuji and Megumi are faced with the special grade curse spirit, which are the highest ranked curse spirits in the verse. Yuji being completely new to Jujutsu and Megumi not being a grade 1 or special grade, obviously we're losing to this curse, but Yuji tells Megumi to leave so he can summon Sukuna and not worry about hurting his teammate. Sukuna completely toys with and dominates his special grade curse and tells him he can't believe that he's in the same ranking as an insect like him. But keep in mind, rankings for Jujutsu sorcerers and curse spirits are completely different, as grade 1 sorcerers are said to be able to match up against special grade curse spirits. But this is still a pretty insane feat with just one of his fingers. Sukuna being the king of curses as well obviously had amazing implications on its own, pretty clearly implying that he's the strongest curse to ever exist. And when Kenjaku is asked by Kashimo who he thinks the strongest person in history was, he says Sukuna. But keep in mind, Gojo wasn't alive at this point. But people like to say to this that Kenjaku has seen 6 Eyes and Infinity users before, so Sukuna would be stronger than Gojo, but it's absolutely unprovable that these 6 Eyes users were still as strong as Gojo. Sukuna's soul and being are implied to be above most other people very much in the series, such as when Mahito attempts to touch Yuji's soul and accidentally touches Sukuna's as well, since him and Yuji inhabit the same body. And Sukuna literally just fear hacks Mahito here and cuts him up, kicking him out of his innate domain. Mahito obviously suffered serious injuries from this, and after the fight, he says that the Sukuna that he fought in his current state has curse energy levels that should be less than even Jogo's, but his presence and his soul are on a completely different level. And he says that if Sukuna were on their side, he would be confident that the Age of Curses would come back and they would win, even if Mahito and his friends were completely annihilated. And there actually is a time where Sukuna's presence and Gojo's presence are compared. This is in the Shibuya arc where Gojo feeds Yuji a bunch of fingers, as well as these 2 girls. And once Sukuna incarnates, Jogo says that Sukuna's strength is different from Satoru Gojo's. It's overwhelmingly evil, and he's scared to even move in his presence because he thinks he's gonna die. Showing once again that even if you're a special grade in Sukuna's presence, you can get fear hacks, and you probably will. But most of this 15 finger Sukuna feats comes in the Shibuya arc, where he fights Jogo and Mahoraga. And I'll be going over the Jogo fight first, because I'll be honest, this fight is really bad for Jogo. To start off the fight, I kid you not, the first panel we see introducing us to this fight is this right here. Jogo seemingly unconscious and spitting up blood, and Sukuna saying, "Come on, is that all you got, cursed spirit?" Jogo then wakes up and tries to use an attack, but his hands are cut by Sukuna, and Sukuna gets behind him and sends him flying down to the ground. But before he hits the ground, Sukuna grabs him once more, and then slams him all the way through a building. At this moment, Jogo has a flashback to when he's talking to Geto, or Kenjaku, and Kenjaku told him that he'll be about 8 or 9 fingers of strength, which was a high ball by Kenjaku, but Jogo didn't think that the difference in strength would be this great. Jogo, after the fight resumes, resorts to a maximum technique, and maximum techniques are considered the ultimate techniques behind domain expansions, since they allow a technique to use their maximum output of cursed energy, putting it at the peak of its power. And this maximum meteor that Jogo uses is said to be able to completely level a town, and Sukuna even says that it might have damaged him if he hit him. But this is the part of the fight where things get really interesting for Sukuna. After calling Jogo a loser, he tells him that since things are getting interesting, he's gonna fight using his specialty. And then we see Sukuna say a symbol of a box and open, and he conjures actual flames. Now there are many theories on how Sukuna's curse technique works. I won't get into that in this video since it doesn't really matter, but if you want that to get its own dedicated video, just drop it in the comments down below. But after conjuring these flames, Sukuna and Jogo get ready for a flame battle. Jogo is obviously completely destroyed in this battle and is actually killed, but Sukuna tells him to stand proud and that he's strong, which is a pretty interesting compliment. And keep in mind that Sukuna only used 2 curse techniques in this battle. and he never even needed to use reverse curse technique. Now the next fight in Shibuya that we'll be going over is the Mahoraga fight. Sukuna starts off the battle completely tanking Mahoraga's blade, which is enveloped with positive energy, and he says if he was his cursed spirit form that he would probably be a goner. And he then punches Mahoraga in the face and uses Dismantle to cut him up. But Mahoraga just spins the wheel on his head and his wounds completely heal. And Sukuna attempts to use his curse technique once again, but this time Mahoraga is able to see the curse technique and deflect the attack, showing that he's adapting to Sukuna in his fighting style. He then rushes at Sukuna, and Sukuna in pure Sukuna fashion just puts his hands up to block instead of just dodging an attack, but gets sent flying through multiple buildings. And in the extra info page of this chapter, it actually says that Sukuna flew all the way outside of the curtain in this scene, showing that Mahoraga hits with enough force to break the curtain that Yuji wasn't able to break before at the beginning of this arc. But Sukuna seems completely fine after being hit with this and just says not bad. And Mahoraga tries to hit him once again, but Sukuna actually dodges this one and gets on Mahoraga, kicking him in the face and using his curse technique once more. Sukuna then kicks Mahoraga to the ground, and just as Sukuna predicted, Mahoraga just spins the wheel on his head and gets right back up. And he explains that Mahoraga is someone who adapts to the fighting style of whoever he fights. Since after he hit Sukuna with positive energy and it didn't work, he switched to using curse energy. And after being hit by a curse technique, he has the ability to adapt to any and all phenomena, kinda like a late throw in rock paper scissors. But Sukuna is completely unfazed by this and just says if it was me in my 3-finger state, he might have been able to beat me. And then opens his domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. Sukuna's domain expansion takes use of both of his curse techniques, both Cleave and Dismantle. Dismantle, which is able to cut anything without curse energy, and Cleave, which cuts anything with curse energy, and changes his curse energy level in order to cut whatever target it comes into contact with. But Sukuna's domain is explained to be different from other domains, since other domains like Mahito's and Jogo's create completely different spaces using a barrier. But Sukuna is able to realize a domain without the use of a barrier, and it's akin to an artist painting a masterpiece, not on a canvas, but on the air. But to clarify real quick, calling this domain barrierless isn't really the right term for it, since it does indeed have a barrier. As explained in a Twitter thread by the user Lightning446, who reads Jujutsu Kaisen in Japanese and actually is a translator hired by Viz for their other mangas, showing you that I'm not just giving you some random translation from a random Twitter user, and this person actually has some merit to their name. Lightning explains here that a clearer translation of this sentence would be that Malevolent Shrine differs from other domains in that it doesn't separate space from its barrier. The ability to materialize an innate domain without closing its barrier is equivalent to drawing art not on a canvas, but on air, showing that rather than creating a completely new space, it just paints itself on the air itself without creating a completely new space and separating it from the space it's already in. So rather than there actually being no barrier, it's really that there's no outer shell to this domain expansion. And to credit Viz, they actually do change this in the later chapters with Kenjaku's domain expansion, where they explain that it's the same as Sukuna's and Shibuya's, where it just doesn't have an outer shell. But it does still very clearly have a barrier to it, and Yuki even says this, calling the barrier powerful. But obviously after using his domain, Sukuna is able to completely mangle and destroy Mahoraga and kill him faster than he can even adapt. But it's actually shown that Mahoraga did adapt to this in time and began regenerating, but before he could finish, Sukuna uses his flames again and just one-shots it. Now after all of that, I'd like to remind you that this Sukuna that we talked about was mainly only 3-finger and 15-finger Sukuna, which should tell you that 20-finger Sukuna should be league stronger. So taking that into account, we can finally go over some of the feats of Gojo, the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer of modern day. Now to start right off the bat, I'll just explain here that Gojo is way stronger than 15-finger Sukuna. There's really not a way to get around this when you see that Yuji, someone who can sense Sukuna's power, says that someone like Yuta should have the ability to take him down if Sukuna were to incarnate in Yuji's body. But even if you don't agree with that, Gojo right now is fighting someone who is stronger than 15-finger Sukuna. That of course being Sukuna in Megami's body with his curse technique, as well as higher than 19 fingers level. Now to begin with Gojo scaling, I'll have to explain his curse technique, since that is definitely one of the most argued upon things in the Jujutsu Kaisen verse, and no one really knows how it works. Not even his creator, and to put this into perspective, the creator of the manga and the technique had to get mathematicians on the case in order to figure out how this technique even worked. And even then it was very convoluted. Gojo's curse technique is limitless, which can be split into about 4 different curse techniques. The main one being the neutral limitless, which is the most confusing of the bunch. And as explained by Gege, this ability works similar to the Achilles and the tortoise paradox, where in the race, even though Achilles is faster than the tortoise, in order for Achilles to catch up to the tortoise, he would have to cross an seemingly infinite amount of points that the tortoise had already crossed. Meanwhile, the tortoise is still moving ahead. It's kind of hard to explain vocally, but I'll put a picture on the screen so you can have a better understanding of it. This basically basically means Gojo can infinitely converge space in order to make it so you cannot touch him, no matter how far of a distance you travel. And yes, the space can be infinite, and this is stated in the math lecture that I mentioned before. Gojo also has the ability of blue, which can create a strong force of attraction that gets stronger and stronger depending on how much cursed energy he puts into the technique. He can also create a maximum blue, which allows him to use the maximum cursed energy output for the technique and clear out most of the vicinity he's in at the time. And the next curse technique he has is the curse technique Reversal Red, which is achieved when Gojo actually is able to pour positive energy into his Limitless, creating a curse technique reversal, giving it a strong repelling force rather than an attracting one that blue gives. And the overall output of red is said to be more than double the curse energy necessary to use blue. And the last and arguably most dangerous technique Gojo has in his arsenal is the Hollow technique Purple. This curse technique is achieved when both red and blue collide with each other, and this collision creates an imaginary mass which destroys anything in its path. This curse technique was thought to be existence erasure at one point, but this is proven not true in the recent chapters. But even though it doesn't literally erase things from existence, it is still pretty strong, being able to completely rip through half of Toji Fushigero's body. Now moving on to Gojo's actual strength, this might be the most obvious part of the video, but he is definitely the strongest current sorcerer of this age. This is stated more times for me to even count, and is really never contradicted in the series, but I'll show on screen a few instances of him being called this. Now back to the scaling, do you remember that one finger Sukuna that I was talking about that completely destroyed a curse that Megami and Yuji were struggling against? Well, that same Sukuna was able to get completely no-diffed by Gojo, and Sukuna even says that he's unbelievably fast. And after experiencing this strength and being asked by Yuji who would win in a fight between him and Sukuna, he says that it might be a little tough, but he would come out on top. And do you remember the curse Jogo that 15th finger Sukuna fought and he used flames on? Well, Gojo was also able to completely no-diff this curse, with Kenjaku saying that Jogo and him working together wouldn't even be able to kill Gojo. And I want you to keep in mind that while beating Jogo to a pulp, Gojo was also teaching Yuji Itadori about battle, and overall wasn't taking the fight too seriously. The same as Sukuna. But in this fight, he does show his first uses of domain expansion. If an enemy is caught in Gojo's domain expansion, the domain sure-hit effect forces targets to perform endless life activities, forcing upon them an infinite amount of information and gently guiding them towards death. And most likely the only reason that Jogo was able to survive this is because Gojo pulled him out of it early and wanted to interrogate him. I don't think it's very contentious to say that if Sukuna is hit with this domain expansion and doesn't envelop his own domain, that he would definitely die by the sheer amount of information he's being hit with. Also, to go over Gojo's technique a little bit more here, he can also use this to do things like fly and teleport, and in the current manga, the author kinda gave him the ability of just basic gravity manipulation, which is someone he's fighting Sukuna currently, and is able to completely pull up an entire bridge without even touching it, which isn't something we're really shown beforehand. And I forgot to mention that Gojo also has the 6 eyes technique, which allows him to see through an opponent's curse technique, meaning that as soon as he sees Sukuna, Cleave and Dismantle are both exposed. And he might even be able to see the tracks of Cleave and Dismantle just as Mahoraga did, since he will be able to see the cursed energy inside of them with his 6 eyes. And using these 6 eyes is what allows Gojo to use the Limitless technique to its fullest extent. And it's even said by one of his strongest students, Yuta Okosu, that while using curse techniques, the curse energy that he loses is infinitesimally close to 0, meaning that he can really never run out of curse energy, which gives him a pretty clear stamina advantage over Sukuna here. Now before I move on to who would truly win, I want to go over some of the commonly used arguments by pretty dishonest people that say one side wins. The first argument is that Gojo couldn't destroy one of Sukuna's fingers, so he wouldn't be stronger than 20 finger Sukuna. Not only is this argument completely dishonest, it just proves that you haven't read the series, or any of its extra material. Special grade cursed objects are actually stated to be indestructible due to a binding vow that's imbued in them. This binding vow makes it so they can't be destroyed, but their existence is guaranteed, so they won't just die off. So this isn't really a strength thing, but it's more of an inverse law. Another thing concerning Sukuna's fingers is that they are always growing in power, which is an argument used to say that Sukuna is never in his prime until currently. This just blatantly isn't true. There's no inverse reason for him to be gaining power while dead, and nothing implies that this is some kind of new power, but rather it can just be some kind of power that he had lost before, but is gaining back slowly. Now to talk about who truly wins this battle, we have to go over domains, since that is the peak of Jujutsu sorcery. If you want an in-depth explanation on what would happen if they had a domain clash, my friend Jaded made a video on this, and it's a pretty good video, so you should check it out. But what really matters is which domain you think is more polished or refined. Now this only implies when domains are enveloped at the same time, but Gojo does say in a clash like this, the one that's more polished does reign supreme. To me, it would seem kind of weird if someone like Kenjaku was able to win a domain clash against Gojo, since Kenjaku spent almost his whole life literally hiding from Gojo and trying to seal him up in this little prison realm that he got. And it's implied that Kenjaku really has no way of beating Gojo outside of the prison realm. So for me, I don't believe that just because his domain has no shell, that Sukuna's domain is more polished than Gojo's, since if that were the case, it would lead to some pretty weird scaling for Kenjaku. But even then, I don't really believe that the domains would be enveloped at the same time, since Gojo does have a 0.2 second domain, which if Sukuna isn't expecting it, will completely catch him off guard and beat him, since the only time that Sukuna has seen a 0.2 second domain was in his own innate domain when Mahito used it, and actually kind of blitzed Sukuna in this instance. But excluding domains, I also do believe this fight isn't very fair. Now there are a few things in the Gojo section that I left out because they would simply make the video too short, but I'll go over them here now. First of all, Gojo was just stated to be the strongest character in the manga. And if you don't believe me, I'll put the statement up here, and we've actually seen 20 Finger Sukuna on screen. But if you don't believe that this is supposed to be an appearance from Sukuna, like some people say, then that's perfectly fine. I'll give more reasons as to why he would be stronger than Sukuna anyway. In the fanbook of Jujutsu Kaisen, Gege Akutami, the creator of JJK, says that Gojo's character came about by wanting to create an uncomplicated power ceiling for the verse. Not just the current sorcerers, but the verse itself. Showing that Gojo's purpose in the series was to create a peak of the verse rather than just some strong sorcerer that we all know and love. And there's also another statement in the fanbook where Gege is asked who the strongest character that has appeared in the manga so far is, and he says that it is Gojo. Now the final argument I'll go over to convince you that Gojo wins this battle undoubtedly is that Gojo is currently fighting a sorcerer stronger than the previous Sukuna. That of course being Sukuna within Megumi's body. Now you might be asking what makes this Sukuna stronger than 20 Finger Sukuna, and it's actually outlined for us pretty obviously. After Sukuna gained all of his fingers except for one, he's given a mummified head by Kenjaku, which seemingly gives him a power up, as he says that this easily compensates for one finger, meaning that this Sukuna is stronger than 20 Finger Sukuna, as well as the fact that he has a 10 shadow technique as well as his own curse techniques, giving him amazing abilities to use in battle. But even with all of this, current day Gojo is still holding up, even when these two specific versions of these characters are stated to be the strongest in history. But that's all I have for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video and subscribe, since as I mentioned before, this is my first JJK video, but I really do enjoy the verse, so if you enjoy this type of content, of course make sure to like and comment down below what you think of the video itself. But yeah, goodbye.